The most gifted athlete in your high school is probably working a dead-end job right now. The valedictorian who effortlessly aced every test, they're stuck in middle management wondering why their career stalled. Meanwhile, the kid who struggled through calculus 3 times just sold their company for 8 figures. When you repeatedly expose yourself to controlled stress and push through resistance, you're triggering a cascade of neurobiological changes that fundamentally alter how your brain processes challenge. The anterior cingulate cortex, which governs attention and conflict monitoring, begins to thicken with gray matter. This isn't metaphorical, it's measurable structural change visible on brain imaging. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex develops stronger inhibitory connections with the amygdala, your brain's alarm system. This enhanced connectivity means that when stressful situations arise, your thinking brain maintains greater control over your emotional brain. The result is improved decision-making under pressure and reduced reactivity to perceived threats. Even more fascinating is what happens at the cellular level. Repeated exposure to manageable stress increases the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, essentially fertilizer for your neurons. This protein promotes the growth of new neural connections and strengthens existing ones, particularly in areas associated with learning, memory, and executive function. Your brain literally builds new hardware to handle future challenges more effectively. The neurochemical changes are equally profound. Your dopamine system becomes more responsive to the process of overcoming difficulty rather than just the outcome. This means you start to derive satisfaction from the struggle itself, not just the victory. Your norepinephrine levels optimize, improving focus and alertness without triggering anxiety. Your GABA production increases, enhancing your ability to stay calm under pressure. Perhaps most importantly, your brain's default mode network, the regions active when you're not focused on specific tasks, begins to operate differently. Instead of defaulting to worry, rumination, or comfort-seeking thoughts, your resting neural patterns become oriented toward problem-solving and opportunity recognition. This shift in your brain's baseline state means that resilience becomes your default response rather than something you have to consciously activate. These adaptations don't happen overnight, but they begin within days of consistent practice. Each time you choose discomfort over ease, you're literally sculpting your neural architecture for enhanced performance. The person who regularly challenges themselves develops a brain that interprets stress as information rather than threat, difficulty as opportunity rather than obstacle. Their nervous system becomes calibrated for growth rather than protection, creating a biological foundation for sustained high performance that no amount of raw talent can match. The mathematics of neuroplasticity operate on exponential curves, not linear progressions. When you perform a challenging action consistently, even for just 5 minutes daily, you're initiating what neuroscientists call activity-dependent plasticity. Each repetition strengthens the myelin sheaths around the neural pathways associated with persistence, making these circuits fire faster and more efficiently. What starts as a laborious mental effort gradually becomes an automated response pattern. Consider the neurochemical cascade that occurs with consistent practice. Initially, your brain resists the unfamiliar challenge, releasing stress hormones and activating energy conservation mechanisms. But within 14 days of consistent exposure, your neural networks begin optimizing for this new demand. Your brain starts producing more mitochondria in regions associated with sustained effort, literally increasing your cellular energy capacity. Your glial cells, the support network for neurons, multiply to provide better maintenance for these high-activity circuits. The temporal dynamics are crucial here. Your brain doesn't adapt to occasional intense efforts. It adapts to patterns it perceives as permanent. A single heroic workout might feel impressive, but it doesn't trigger lasting neural change. However, a modest daily challenge performed consistently sends a clear signal to your nervous system. This is the new normal, so optimize accordingly. This is where compound interest principles apply to neurobiology. Each day of consistent practice doesn't just maintain your current level, it builds upon the previous day's adaptations. Week 1 might feel difficult. Week 4 feels manageable. Week 12 feels natural. By month 6, what once required significant willpower now feels like part of your identity because it literally has become wired into your brain's operating system. The research on habit formation reveals that consistent behaviors create structural changes in the basal ganglia, the brain region responsible for automatic behaviors. After approximately 66 days of consistent practice, these neural circuits become so well established that performing the behavior requires minimal conscious effort. You've essentially programmed your brain to default toward challenging actions rather than comfortable ones. More remarkably, this consistency effect transfers across domains. When you develop consistency in one challenging area, whether physical training, cognitive tasks, or emotional regulation, you're strengthening the general neural networks associated with persistence. Your brain becomes more efficient at overcoming resistance in entirely different contexts. The person who consistently does difficult workouts finds it easier to persist through challenging work projects. The individual who maintains consistent study habits develops greater emotional resilience. This cross-domain transfer occurs because consistency trains the fundamental neural circuits of persistence, creating what researchers call cognitive reserve, a buffer of mental resources that can be deployed across multiple life challenges. The conventional understanding of stress as purely detrimental fundamentally misses the adaptive potential of controlled stress exposure. When you deliberately subject yourself to manageable stressors, whether through cold exposure, challenging workouts, or demanding cognitive tasks, you activate what researchers call hormesis, a biological phenomenon where low doses of stress trigger beneficial adaptations that exceed the initial cost. At the physiological level, controlled stress exposure optimizes your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the master control system for your stress response. Instead of chronic cortisol elevation that degrades performance, you develop what's termed stress inoculation. Your system learns to mount an appropriate response quickly and then return to baseline efficiently. Your cortisol curves become sharper and more precise, rising rapidly when needed but clearing faster during recovery periods. The cardiovascular adaptations are equally profound. Repeated exposure to controlled stress increases heart rate variability, a key marker of autonomic nervous system flexibility. This enhanced variability means your nervous system can shift more effectively between states of high alertness and deep recovery. Your parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest and repair, becomes more responsive, allowing for faster recovery between challenging episodes. Neurologically, controlled stress exposure triggers the release of norepinephrine in optimal concentrations. This neurotransmitter enhances focus, attention, and memory consolidation when present in moderate amounts. The key distinction is dosage. Chronic, uncontrolled stress floods your system with excessive norepinephrine, impairing cognitive function. But deliberate, time-limited stress exposure creates precisely the neurochemical environment that enhances performance. Perhaps most significantly, controlled stress exposure recalibrates your perception of threat versus challenge. Your anterior cingulate cortex learns to interpret elevated arousal as preparation for peak performance rather than danger to be avoided. This perceptual shift is measurable through brain imaging. Individuals who regularly engage in controlled stress show increased activity in challenge appraisal regions and decreased activity in threat detection areas. When facing new stressors, the immunological benefits compound these effects. Controlled stress exposure increases the production of heat shock proteins, cellular repair mechanisms that protect against future damage. Your inflammatory response becomes more precise, mounting appropriate immune reactions without triggering chronic inflammation. Your cellular cleanup processes, including autophagy, become more efficient at removing damaged components and rebuilding stronger ones. This creates a powerful feedback loop. The more you expose yourself to appropriate levels of controlled stress, the more your entire system adapts to handle greater challenges with less disruption. Your baseline capacity expands while your recovery time contracts, creating an ever-widening gap between your capabilities and those who avoid all discomfort. When you consistently reframe obstacles as opportunities for development, you're literally rewiring fundamental neural circuits that govern how your brain interprets environmental challenges. This isn't positive thinking, it's measurable neuroplasticity in action. Brain imaging studies reveal that individuals who view difficulties as growth opportunities show distinctly different activation patterns in their prefrontal cortex, particularly in regions associated with cognitive reappraisal and executive control. The neurochemical foundation of this circuit involves dopamine pathway optimization. Instead of dopamine firing only upon achieving outcomes, your brain begins releasing this motivation neurotransmitter during the process of tackling challenges. This shift is profound because it means your reward system becomes aligned with effort and learning rather than just results. You literally become neurochemically motivated by the struggle itself, not merely the victory at the end. At the cellular level, this mindset shift triggers increased production of brain-derived neurotropic factor, specifically in regions associated with learning and adaptation. Your hippocampus, crucial for memory formation and pattern recognition, develops enhanced connectivity with your prefrontal cortex. This improved communication allows you to more rapidly identify similarities between current challenges and past successful adaptations, accelerating your problem-solving capabilities. The default mode network undergoes significant restructuring when you consistently practice growth-oriented thinking. During rest periods, your brain's background processing shifts from rumination about problems to pattern recognition for solutions. Neuroimaging shows increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex and decreased activity in regions associated with self-criticism and threat monitoring. Your brain's idle state becomes oriented toward opportunity detection rather than threat vigilance. Mirror neuron systems also adapt to this mindset shift. These specialized neurons, which fire both when you perform an action and when you observe others performing similar actions, become more active when witnessing others overcome challenges. This creates enhanced learning from observation and increased social resilience. You begin automatically extracting lessons from others' struggles rather than feeling discouraged by their difficulties. The error monitoring system in your anterior cingulate cortex undergoes particularly interesting changes. Rather than triggering avoidance responses when detecting mistakes or obstacles, this region begins generating increased activity in problem-solving networks. Errors become signals for course correction rather than indications of inadequacy. This neural reframing is measurable within weeks of consistent practice and creates a biological foundation for persistence that operates below conscious awareness. Most remarkably, this growth-oriented neural circuitry becomes self-reinforcing. Each successful reframing of a challenge strengthens the neural pathways responsible for growth mindset thinking, making future reframes more automatic and efficient. Your brain essentially becomes biased toward seeing opportunities where others see obstacles, creating compound advantages in every domain of life. The ability to maintain cognitive control during emotional activation represents one of the most sophisticated neural achievements of mental toughness. When you consistently practice emotional regulation under stress, you're strengthening the inhibitory connections between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system, particularly the amygdala. This enhanced top-down control creates what neuroscientists call cognitive emotional integration. Your thinking brain maintains executive authority even when your emotional centers are highly activated. The physiological mechanisms underlying this mastery involve the vagus nerve, your body's longest cranial nerve that connects your brain to major organs. Regular emotional regulation practice increases vagal tone, which directly correlates with your ability to maintain calm alertness under pressure. Higher vagal tone translates to more precise heart rate variability, better inflammatory control, and enhanced recovery between stressful episodes. Your autonomic nervous system becomes more responsive to conscious control, rather than operating purely on automatic emotional reactions. At the neurotransmitter level, emotional regulation mastery optimizes your GABA production, your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. Enhanced GABA function allows you to dampen excessive neural firing in emotional centers while maintaining optimal activation in cognitive regions. Simultaneously, your serotonin pathways become more efficient, providing better mood stability and reducing the amplitude of emotional swings that typically derail performance. The anterior cingulate cortex undergoes particularly significant adaptations during emotional regulation training. This region, which monitors conflicts between different neural systems, develops enhanced connectivity with both cognitive and emotional networks. The result is improved metacognitive awareness. You become more skilled at observing your emotional states without being hijacked by them. Brain imaging reveals increased gray matter density in this region among individuals who regularly practice emotional regulation. Neuroplasticity research shows that consistent emotional regulation practice creates structural changes in the insula, your brain's interoceptive awareness center. This enhanced body awareness allows for earlier detection of emotional activation, providing more time for conscious intervention before emotions reach overwhelming intensity. You develop what researchers term emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between subtle variations in emotional states and respond appropriately to each. The orbitofrontal cortex, responsible for evaluating potential outcomes of actions, becomes more active during emotional regulation practice. This increased activation allows for better cost-benefit analysis during emotionally charged situations. You maintain access to executive decision-making even when your emotional systems are signaling urgency or threat. The neurological result is decision-making that remains aligned with long-term goals rather than short-term emotional impulses, creating sustained performance advantages across all challenging contexts. The divergence between talent-reliant individuals and those who develop mental toughness becomes most pronounced during what researchers call performance inflection points, moments when natural ability alone becomes insufficient to progress further. Talent provides what neuroscientists term cognitive fluency in early stages of skill development, allowing rapid initial progress through existing neural pathways. However, this same fluency creates a neurological vulnerability. The brain becomes optimized for comfort and efficiency rather than adaptation and growth. Brain imaging studies reveal that highly talented individuals who haven't developed mental toughness show decreased activation in effort-related neural networks when encountering difficulty. Their anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for effort allocation, demonstrates reduced responsiveness to challenge. Essentially, their brains have become calibrated for ease rather than persistence, creating a neurological ceiling that limits long-term development. When they encounter obstacles that exceed their natural capacity, their neural response is avoidance rather than engagement. Conversely, individuals who have systematically developed mental toughness show increased activation in effort monitoring regions when facing setbacks. Their brains interpret difficulty as a signal to increase resource allocation rather than withdraw. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, associated with working memory and cognitive control, maintains higher baseline activity levels, providing sustained cognitive resources during challenging periods. This creates what researchers call effortful persistence, the ability to maintain high performance even when natural talent is insufficient. The temporal dynamics of this performance gap are particularly revealing. Talent-dependent individuals show rapid early gains, followed by plateau periods that become increasingly difficult to overcome. Their learning curves flatten as challenges exceed their comfort zone. Mental toughness developed individuals demonstrate more gradual initial progress, but maintain consistent improvement trajectories across extended time periods. Their learning curves compound over time because their brains are optimized for adaptation rather than just performance. Longitudinal studies tracking performance over decades reveal that mental toughness becomes increasingly predictive of success as time progresses. In the first year, talent often dominates outcomes. By year 5, mental toughness becomes equally predictive. By year 10, mental toughness consistently outpredicts talent across virtually every measured domain. This isn't because talent becomes irrelevant, but because the neural adaptations created by mental toughness compound exponentially, while raw talent remains relatively static. The neuroplasticity research is unambiguous. Brains optimized for challenge-seeking continue developing new capabilities throughout the lifespan, while brains optimized for comfort-seeking show decreased neuroplasticity over time. Mental toughness creates a biological foundation for lifelong growth that transcends the limitations of genetic endowment, establishing sustainable competitive advantages that increase rather than diminish with age. Here's what you're going to do starting today. Not tomorrow. Not next Monday. Today. First, identify one small daily challenge that creates slight discomfort. Cold shower for 30 seconds. 10 push-ups when you wake up. Reading for 15 minutes instead of scrolling. The key is selecting something manageable but uncomfortable, something your brain will resist but your body can handle. Second, commit to this challenge for exactly 30 days. Mark it on your calendar. Set a phone reminder. Tell someone who will hold you accountable. Your brain needs to recognize this as a non-negotiable pattern, not a casual experiment. Third, track your compliance, not your feelings. Create a simple yes/no record. Did you do it or not? Mental toughness is measured by behavior under resistance, not by how motivated you feel. Some days you'll want to quit. Do it anyway. That's precisely when the neural adaptation occurs. Fourth, observe the transfer effects. Notice how pushing through resistance in one area makes other challenges feel more manageable. Watch how your decision-making improves under pressure. Pay attention to how your recovery between stressful events becomes faster and more complete. Finally, understand that you're not just building a habit, you're literally rewiring your brain's operating system. Every moment of discomfort you push through is an investment in neural infrastructure that will compound for decades. Your talented competitors are waiting for motivation. Your mentally tough future self is taking action regardless of how they feel. The gap between these two approaches isn't just performance, it's an entirely different category of human being. The research is done. The mechanisms are understood. The only variable left is your decision. Start now. Your brain is listening.